Hey everyone, what's going on? Jeff here from Films at Home, and today in this video we're going to be talking about movies that really need a 4K release, but also some of the reasons that these movies may never see the light of day on 4K because of recent events in the movie industry and home entertainment business. So I'm going to run through a bunch of movies that never got a 4K release as of now, March of 2022, and this is sort of an update to a video I did probably 3 years ago. And luckily, because we've had so many great 4K releases recently, a lot of those movies in the video from 3 years ago have now been released on 4K, but there are still hundreds, if not thousands, of other movies that I really do think deserve the 4K treatment. So I'll cover those here and talk about all the reasons why we may never see them on 4K, which is super unfortunate, and maybe what needs to change in order for that to happen. Now, if you enjoy this type of content, talking about Blu-ray, 4K, DVD collecting, physical media, home entertainment, home theater reviews, 4K reviews, any of that sort of stuff, please consider subscribing to the channel. We have lots of exciting stuff coming here in 2022, so you're going to want to join this community. Click that subscribe button, make sure you don't miss a video, and help us hit our goal of 100,000 subscribers here in 2022. Really appreciate that, and now let's get started with the video. So I'm going to kick things off here by talking about two of my favorite directors and their incredible filmography, and why we need their movies on 4K and why we may not have gotten them yet. So the first one is Quentin Tarantino. Now, we had his most recent movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, come to 4K, but that was mostly because it was released while 4K was already a viable format, and he made sure that it got a wide release on DVD, Blu-ray, 4K, and all of the streaming platforms. So that was more a product of just when the movie was released. But lots of Tarantino's work has not come to 4K yet. Of course, we have the classics like Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction. You also have Jackie Brown, the Kill Bill movies. We've got Django Unchained, The Hateful Eight, which would both look incredible on 4K. And then we did get the Inglourious Basterds 4K release, but unfortunately, that one wasn't great. The source wasn't great. Universal had some issues with that disc, and I didn't love it. So I'm really looking forward to more Tarantino on 4K, and I'm hopeful, given some rumors and discussions, that they're coming in 2022. Now, I think the reason that these have been delayed so long, and the reason why we haven't seen them yet, is because if you know Quentin Tarantino, he is sort of a perfectionist and wants total control over his stuff. I would guarantee that if they do a 4K release, they have to run it by him, and he would want to make sure it's perfect. There is also the small chance that he doesn't really believe in the 4K format. I've heard that from some other directors, like Paul Thomas Anderson doesn't like his movies being shown in 4K or being, getting 4K releases, which is why like his latest, Licorice Pizza, is only getting a Blu-ray release. So there's often some times with like directors where they have odd things like that, and no, I don't want my movie to be transferred to 4K. I don't know if that's Tarantino's case. I do think that since he embraces home video and grew up in that world, that we will see these releases, but his catalog of films is a must-have in 4K, and I would love to see them do a complete collection. The other director we have to talk about, who is notorious for not getting his movies even to Blu-ray in some cases, is David Fincher. Now, his catalog of films is also incredible. It's right up there with people like Spielberg or Tarantino. I mean, he's one of the greatest sort of thriller, crime, gritty, type of movie director that we've had recently. He's created some of the best stuff out there in that sort of subgenre. But unfortunately, we don't really have most of his movies on 4K. The only one that we do have is The Social Network, and that came as part of the Columbia Classics set. So a lot of you may not have that since it doesn't have a standalone release. Now, Fincher is notoriously difficult to work with on his 4K releases because he wants total control. So much like James Cameron, and the reason we don't have a lot of James Cameron movies, which I covered in my past 4K release that we need video, Fincher has the same kind of deal. He has to be involved with the restoration. He wants supervision over it. And I shouldn't say it makes him difficult to work with. He's just, again, wants to make sure his movies look and feel and sound the best no matter the format. So that's been the delay on a lot of his stuff, as he's been working on other projects like Mindhunter on Netflix, the Netflix film Mank, and his newest stuff. he's been kind of consumed with those projects and hasn't spent a ton of time on his older releases. Now, there are rumors this year that we're going to see Panic Room on 4K, which is great because it never even got a 1080p Blu-ray release, but we need to see more of his stuff on 4K as well. I would love to see Seven. Zodiac is one of my favorite movies of all time. I need that on 4K. I'd also really like to see like The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo or The Game from 1997, one of his most underrated movies. The Game is an incredible movie with Michael Douglas and Sean Penn, one that you have to see. So he's another director who I'd really like to see get sort of a 4K set done, a 4K collection, sort of like Christopher Nolan's done or like they're doing with Hitchcock recently. I put these guys right up there. Fincher and Tarantino, they're at that caliber, and I'd really like to see their stuff get that same treatment that all these other great directors' movies are getting. Now, speaking of Hitchcock, there are a few Hitchcock movies that I'd also like to see come to 4K, and I do think we may get them in the future, considering they just announced a new Hitchcock collection. But because these were made with different studios, there's some rights issues floating around. Now, the ones I'd really love to see are North by Northwest, Dial M for Murder, The Man Who Knew Too Much, and Rope. Rope, in particular, is a Technicolor marvel, and then North by Northwest, Dial M for Murder, and The Man Who Knew Too Much are some of his best movies. And given that we're getting all these other 4K releases of Hitchcock stuff, I'm hopeful that those four can be released in some sort of Volume 3 collection, or at least released individually through their various studios. Now, speaking of Technicolor with Rope, I'd also love to see more Technicolor movies from the 40s and 50s make their way to 4K. I just reviewed the Criterion release of The Red Shoes, and it was incredible. It was one of the best 4K releases that I've seen. In the HDR with Technicolor, it looks awesome. So some of the other highlights, things I'd love to see come to 4K because of that Technicolor enhancement, would be Gone with the Wind, An American in Paris, and The Adventures of Robin Hood. Those three movies could look outstanding in 4K with a proper restoration and some good HDR treatment, and I would love to see the three of them come to 4K at some point. They're classics. They deserve the full restoration treatment. They deserve a 4K release. My question is, with Gone with the Wind, in this current climate, are they going to release that because it has sort of some controversial scenes and topics? I don't know. Obviously, it's an outdated movie. It wouldn't be made the same way today and talked about the same way, but it's a very important piece of movie history. It's like the highest grossing film of all time if you adjust for inflation. So I think it deserves to be seen in 4K. And An American in Paris, I think if Singing in the Rain does well, maybe we'll get to see more of that kind of stuff in American in Paris. And, Robin Hood's kind of underrated and overlooked, but that's another great one that, the colors alone would look incredible on 4K. So a lot of those classic films, I know some of you guys are always wanting the latest and greatest, digitally shot, really impressive movies, but these classic films really got to come to 4K. They can look outstanding with a good restoration. Now, a couple of other movies that I want to talk about, these are actually documentaries, and they were always known as some of the best looking Blu-ray discs, and they are Baraka and Samsara. Now, both of these documentaries were shot at 8K resolution, so they were shot at 8K years ago. And even the Blu-ray discs that exist for them, because they're like 8K sources, they looked incredible. They were hands down the best looking Blu-rays that were out there. It is on par with like your Planet Earth 4K discs, where it's just that outstanding nature documentary type footage. They could be a top 10 all-time 4K disc. So if you haven't heard of them, check them out. Very interesting documentaries, well worth watching, but they're also visual marvels, and I'm really hoping somebody can pick them up and distribute them on 4K because they deserve it. Now, I've also got a few more 4K requests that I guess this shout out would go directly to Kino Lorber. Now, Kino's done a ton of great work with their 4K releases over the last year. They've been eating up the MGM titles, and we'll talk about those in a second. But I'd love to see some more of their very early films get a true 4K release because they have excellent 4K restorations of movies like Nosferatu, The Phantom of the Opera, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, Metropolis, some of these movies from like the 20s and 30s that could look incredible because they already have this great 4K restoration. Let's bring them to, 4K UHD. Let's try to apply some HDR. Even if they are in black and white, the HDR benefits for a black and white movie are actually pretty significant. And so I'd love to see Kino, tackle some of those really classic horror, classic early, huge budget movies that were very popular and I think get overlooked. Nosferatu and Dr. Caligari, they inspired so many future horror directors, and there's been sort of this resurgence in folk horror, kind of artsy horror. I believe even Robert Eggers, who did The Lighthouse and The Witch, is looking at a new Nosferatu movie. He would be perfect for that. But I think with this sort of resurgence, I'd love to see those revisited and get a true 4K release. Now, on the topic of horror, real quickly, there are a couple franchises that desperately need 4K releases, and they're two of the biggest franchises of all time. Obviously, Nightmare on Elm Street. Those movies deserve a 4K treatment. They should be upgraded to 4K with HDR, and I'm hoping that somebody like Scream Factory, Arrow Video, somebody can pick them up and do what they did with Halloween. But the other thing is, I think Friday the 13th really deserves the true 4K treatment. The Shout Factory box set that they put out last year is incredible. It has beautiful 4K transfers, and the movies look as good as they've ever looked, but they're on Blu-ray disc. And I really wish that they would bring that to true full 4K. Now, unfortunately, the Friday the 13th rights were always a mess, but I did recently hear that a court case went through that might have cleared some of that up, and hopefully this franchise both has a future for new movies and new entries, but also has a little bit of a revitalized, home video opportunity here for the older releases. I'm hoping maybe Shout Factory can make that happen. They've already got the 4K transfers. They did a bunch of restoration work. I know a lot of us spent money on that box set on Blu-ray, and for a lot of people that's going to be enough quality, and most collectors won't care for 4K, but for us home theater sticklers who want the best quality, I'd love to see those get a true 4K release. And now quickly at the end here, some 4K movies that I want to talk about, and these relate directly to the Fox Disney acquisition and the recently closed and agreed upon Amazon and MGM acquisition. So let me start with Fox first, and I've talked about this for a couple of years now, but if you don't believe me by now, people didn't believe me 2 years ago, but if you don't believe me by now, I don't know what else, I need for proof. But Disney is not working the Fox catalog or the Disney catalog when it comes to live action movies for 4K physical media releases. We have not seen a Disney or Fox movie come to 4K that has had a new restoration or new transfer done in the last 2 years. Roger Rabbit, that was already completed by Fox. Home Alone, those were already completed by Fox. Speed, already completed by Fox. Those were all done and sitting in the vault ready to go. So the team at Disney is not working on any 4K restorations. They're not doing any work for physical media. It's super disappointing, especially when it comes to the Fox catalog, because there are some excellent movies that need to get to 4K. So we've been waiting years now for Heat. That was supposed to come out last year on 4K. It already has a 4K master, and Disney pulled it back at the last minute because they weren't sure about some rights issues they were having with it and didn't know if they were going to retain that property. Now that that's been solved, I'm kind of hopeful that Heat will finally make its way to 4K since the work was already done by the Fox team. But that Fox catalog has a ton of other movies. Aliens, or the rest of the Alien series, no 4K releases on those. I think we would have got them from Fox, given that they did the full Predator lineup. But there's issues with like David Fincher and James Cameron both owning two of those movies as well, so they're holding up transfers. But then Fox has other great movies like Patton, The Longest Day, Cleopatra, some great horror movies like The Omen, and then of course their original Planet of the Apes series, which is owned by Fox. I would love to see a Planet of the Apes 4K box set for all of those classic Planet of the Apes movies. I know the quality of them went down over the years, but even just the original Planet of the Apes would be incredible to have on 4K and newly restored. But unfortunately, based on what Disney's doing in their track record, I just don't see it coming anytime soon. I think our best chance at getting these Fox titles is potentially a licensing deal with somebody like Arrow Video or Kino or Shout Factory. That's going to be our best shot to get these out on 4K, because otherwise Disney's not doing it. And then we have the MGM catalog, and a lot of people are sending me messages, oh, the Amazon MGM deal went through, this is terrible, this is terrible, this is terrible. I don't really see it as being that terrible, because yeah, Amazon has Amazon Prime and they have streaming services, but they're not Netflix. They're not like Hulu. They're not Disney and Disney Plus. They have a lot more to their business than just streaming. Of course, they're going to create content based on like James Bond or other popular MGM properties. They're going to do what they can to maximize all of these new franchises that they've, now gained access to. And I believe they will do that, and it'll go to Amazon Prime. But the older movies, the classic movies, Kino's been doing a great job putting out MGM releases, And I can just see Amazon continuing to let MGM run its, own deal and license that stuff out, because at the end of the day, where are those discs being sold? 90% of them are being sold on Amazon, and Amazon's taking home the profits. So I think there's still incentive for them to create physical media. It's still a multi-billion-dollar industry, and Amazon certainly profits off of it probably more than anybody. I don't see that being a real issue, and I do hope that more of the MGM catalog, now that it's finally been sorted out and they have an owner, will come to 4K, and I am hopeful that we'll get more stuff. But it'll likely come through boutique labels like Criterion, Kino, Shout, Arrow. That's likely where they're going to head with their properties. So those are the movies I'm really looking for on 4K, and some of the reasons why, we may never get them, or we may not get them for a long time. Hopefully that clears up some questions, some issues, some things that people ask me all the time about. Are we getting this? Are we getting that? Why haven't we seen this movie on 4K? Hopefully this gives you a little bit of an explanation. But, these are the ones that I really want to see as a collector, as a film lover, movie lover. So, let me know if you guys have any suggestions. If I missed any, throw them down in the comments. There are obviously, like I said, hundreds, if not thousands of movies that will probably still come to 4K over the next 5 to 10 years. And definitely deserve that treatment. The question is, how fast will it happen? Will it start to be consolidated? Will boutique labels take over? It's going to be a very interesting next 5 years for this industry, but obviously with the way the boutique labels are pushing out new titles, and even Paramount, Warner, Lionsgate, all these guys, Sony, they're still pushing everything. It's really only Disney that's not supporting physical media at this point. So I have a lot of faith in the format. I think we will see a lot of these movies, and if not released by, the major studios that own them, probably by the boutique labels. But obviously what we've seen with Kino and Arrow and Shout and Criterion, this points to really good things for physical, but also makes a lot of sense that it's going to be consolidated down to a niche kind of boutique market. That's what I expect to see, and hopefully we'll get a bunch of these on 4K, because these are all great movies that definitely deserve it. So I appreciate you all watching this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope that gave you some insight into what's going on in the industry, sort of, movies that I'm looking forward to, and stuff that I'd love to see come to 4K, because this is a little update on that video from like 3 years ago. Wanted to update it. A lot of people had asked, and I think this is a good time to do it, given it's been a few years. So yeah, make sure you subscribe so you never miss another video, and check out all my social media links and follow me on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Those are all down in the description as well. That's a great way to get in touch with me. Also, make sure to check out all the other links down in the description for ways you can support me and the channel. And the biggest thing you can do is watch videos, like, comment, share them. And that's why I appreciate all of you who have stuck around to this point. So thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your day. Stay safe, stay healthy out there, and I will talk to you guys soon.